Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our May webinar. And as usual, I take a look outside the window, and in Cape Town, it's raining. I hope you're having a good winter where you are. And I wanted to put down a couple of housekeeping rules. So today, the normal thing is I'm playing a video. We've got two speakers joining us live. And so if you do have any questions, put them in the Q&A. And then also, if you need to, thanks from the Greaves, please log in and tell us where you're from in the chat. It's always nice to see who's online. And I want to introduce today's topic, which is trees. And I'm going to share my screen. But it's interesting. Trees are almost the dominant life form when people think about plants, and we've covered them in certain facets from a medicinal point of view and so forth in a webinar space. But today we've decided to go with trees as they are, as the main event for this webinar. So let me share my screen. Okay, so here we are. I was fortunate a couple of weekends ago to be in the Cedarburg, and this is looking up the canopy of Witheringtonia cedarburgensis, the Cedarburg, the Clan William cedar, and you can see the bottom trees are deceased, and the top ones in the picture are alive, and that's as a result of the fire which has gone through that cedar plantation at Durif, which is just above the Driehoek campsite. And so in a way, this is one of our most threatened trees, but there are many, many other trees that also deserve our attention. And we've decided to have more of a kind of broad introduction to the tree space. But before that, we're still recovering from the City Nature Challenge, and I wanted to just show a couple of numbers in terms of how we've done, or maps at least. So as you would have known, we are now our naturalist activities in this area are basically Pan-African. So in the last, these are the dots from the last City Nature Challenge. You can see all the way up in Namibia and almost Angola. We've had participation, Mozambique, Eswatini. But this is interesting. So just zooming in a little bit more into Africa so you can see where we are. It's a good idea to have a look at this map for our next rounds of the Great Southern BioBlitz and the City Nature Challenge, see where the gaps are. But I think we're getting some really decent coverage. And then just from a Botanical Society point of view, I filtered out the people who belong to the BotSoc project, which is actually not everyone on this call. But please, if you're not yet a member of the BotSoc project on iNaturalist, go and see. And you can see out of the 140,000 observations in the City Nature Challenge, more than 10% of them were from the BotSoc members. So I just wanted to give ourselves a bit of a hand and a round of applause. We can only do better from here. Okay, great. So I'm going to now go and share a video. So just give me a second to get that going. Perils of working by yourself. And so essentially, we've got a video, a pre-recorded presentation from Yvette Harvey-Brown, who is a conservation officer at the Botanical Gardens Conservation International, who works on using conservation assessments which feed up into scaling these multi-species conservation plans. So that's her background, and it's fascinating to hear how our tree information is getting used, and what the plans are from Africa in from a conservation point of view. So just give me a second to share this video.
Hi everyone, I'm Yvette Harvey-Brown from Botanic Gardens Conservation International. I don't know if you've heard of our organisation before, but we're quite a small plant conservation NGO and our headquarters are based in London in the UK, but we also have offices in Kenya, China and Southeast Asia. And we're a membership organisation with the majority of our members being Botanic Gardens, but we also have a lot of other botanical institutions and research organisations as well. And the majority of plant conservation work that we do really utilises on the botanical expertise held by our member organisations. So when I'm talking through a bit of our work today, it will all be implemented pretty much through our partners as well. So yeah, I'll highlight some of those as I go through. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today about our tree conservation work. And I'll mainly be highlighting the work that we've been doing in Africa. So in 2019, we released quite a big landmark report called The State of the World's Trees. And the kind of headline tagline with this report was that over 30% of tree species are threatened with extinction. And only 17,000 tree species are grown in ex situ collections. So, for example, in botanic gardens, but only 21% of those are threatened. Additionally, 50% of threatened tree species are found in protected areas. However, as a lot of us know, not all protected areas have adequate protection, and many critically endangered species, so those at most risk of extinction, are in unprotected, transformed landscapes. So with this kind of on the back of this report, I mean, there's these big challenges, but there are also opportunities. So we're really trying to use a coordinated approach to scale up the amount of tree conservation that we're doing, but also our kind of partners and member organisations are doing as well. So this is the kind of framework that our tree conservation work happens at BGCI, and our main aim is for no tree species to become extinct. And these are the different stages that and areas of work that this falls under. So first of all, prioritization, then planning, and then acting and also monitoring. So the first one of this is prioritize, and that's making sure that we know which tree species are in need of conservation action, where this action is required, and what are the threats that need to be addressed. So the kind of main big project that falls under this area of work is the Global Tree Assessment. And this is a very ambitious project to have up-to-date IUCN Red List conservation status assessments for all of the world's tree species, so 58,000 by 2023. So we've made amazing progress so far, but we've still got work to do. So it's going to be a busy rest of the year for me and my colleagues at BGCI. But this is a project led by us and also the Global Tree Specialist Group. And it was kind of set up in recognition that when this project started in 2015, there are very few conservation assessments for trees, and those that were available, a lot of them didn't have that much data associated with them. So this is really a big effort to try and update the information that we have on tree species, which ones are the most threatened, what are the threats, where are they found. So each assessment on the red list has map data associated with it, and then having all of this information will really help to push more tree species to have conservation action that they need. So what's going on in Africa? So 1/6 of all of the world tree species are found in Africa, so over 9,000 tree species, and approximately 75% of them have published conservation assessments on the red list, and different areas have different percentages, but we're trying to making progress all of the time to try and get these numbers as close to 100% as possible. And we're really lucky in Africa actually that we do have a lot of botanical expertise. And even additionally on that, we also have a lot of red listing expertise as well. So there's a number of different organisations which are mandated to complete red list assessments and that haven't, also very active. So we've had a lot of work going on like the last 5 years, getting these assessments done, working through these different organisations. So for example, one that I've personally been quite heavily involved in is the East Africa Plant Red List Authority. And they're very active, not only in red listing, but also building capacity of, younger botanists and researchers in the countries in which they do assessments for. So, for example, we had a meeting in Tanzania, Morogoro, in January, and a lot of kind of younger researchers from, for example, the herbarium in Nairobi and in other areas were invited to participate, to learn the process and make sure that the kind of next generation of botanists are there to kind of take the mantle going forward. So that's really exciting that a lot of this work is taking place. And there's been lots of progress. So, for example, the red list of trees in Madagascar was a huge project working with Kew Botanic Gardens, Missouri Botanic Gardens, the University in Antananarivo, and also the Madagascar Plant Specialist Group. Mesa Botanic Garden have also been leading on red listing endemic and subendemic trees of Central Africa. And then also Missouri Botanical Garden have been doing a lot of red listing of Gabon's threatened tree species, which is again a very big task. So yeah, we've still got a long way to go, but we've been making lots of really good progress. And I'm sure you'll be interested to know what's happening in South Africa. So you guys are already well ahead. So you have 2,900 national assessments, which can be found on the SAMBI website. And we've also been working with SAMBI to move these national assessments, so they're not published on the IUCN Red List, and to try and get those onto the system so that they'll kind of have this international recognition. So we've been starting with the endemic species, so those that are found just in South Africa, because there's no external distribution, we can pretty much export these assessments straight onto the IUCN Red List because there shouldn't be any changes. So we've done our first batch of those, which is great. They should be published in the not too distant future. And then we've also been working with other groups. I know a previous webinar looked at Walbergia salutaris, so I helped lead on updating the red list assessment of that species, which was actually downlisted from endangered to vulnerable, which was really excited. And, a lot of that was to do with the great conservation work that has taken place. Okay, so then moving on to the next area of work, following prioritization. This is planning conservation action. So we do this at quite a high level. We have a database called the Global Tree Portal, and this holds country level data. So if you type in a country on the database, it will tell you how many tree species are native, which ones are threatened, which ones are endemic, and then also their conservation status. And you can download that list off of the database. So it's a really good starting point for getting like an overview picture of what are the threatened species to your country, what species are native and which are threatened to your country. It also has a breakdown of the ex situ collections as well. So how many species are found in ex situ collections in the country and also outside of the country as well. And there's also in situ conservation actions are listed there. So again, it's a good place to go to if you're looking at per species what's going on for that species. And then additionally to that kind of higher level, we've also started to do quite a lot of conservation planning. And this is working with the IUCN SSC Conservation Planning Specialist Group, CPSG. And we've been working on planning support for threatened trees at a number of different levels. One of those levels is at the national scale. So in 2020, we did some work on Kenya's threatened trees. So we've been, as I already mentioned, working with the East Africa Plant Specialist Group to red list all of Kenya's endemic trees. So kind of using that data as the backbone of this work. So we knew which species were the most threatened. We had already data on the threats to these species through the assessment and also distribution data. We then set up a framework with the CPSG and the Kenya Forest Service to run a series of planning workshops to kind of move these species from the assessment stage to the planning stage, so that then we could try and facilitate upscale of action. So unfortunately, because this was 2020, we originally hoped to do our workshop in person. This didn't happen, so we did it online. But we had 5 3-hour workshops over a 2-month period. So we had 2 national workshops at the beginning to introduce the project, give context of what the status of Kenya's trees were and current projects. And then we did some national level visioning and goal setting, and then 2 workshops focused on different regions. So the Kaita Hills and the coastal forest, both which have a high density of threatened species, and did threat analysis for those 2 areas, and then came up with objectives and strategies to address those threats, and then reported back in a final national workshop. And the kind of main output of this work was a workshop report. And the kind of long-term impact, because this is 2020 now, so it's 3 years ago, that report's been a really useful tool for developing funding applications, because basically the process is you're getting multiple stakeholders together to kind of iron out what's the issue, what needs to be done, and who's going to do it. And you can kind of pull out that information and put them straight into funding applications. And a lot of these planned actions have now got funding, which is really great. So an example of that is a Climate Connect project funded by the UK Government Darwin Initiative, and that's connecting fragments of coastal forest through upscaling native and threatened tree nurseries. So we've got almost 50,000 growing in Kilifi County. So that's a really nice example of kind of the process from that to act. But looking a bit now outside of the planning work that we've been doing at some other projects on the ground. So we have projects all over Africa, one of them being one in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana for Abrugenia thaiensis. So this is a critically endangered species with less than 50 individuals. And it's quite nice actually, because it's got such a fragmented distribution. This project brings together partners both in Ghana and in Cote d'Ivoire, so they can collaborate and kind of work through the challenges of conserving such an endangered species together. So that's been a really nice project to see that collaboration come together. Another one is the Malandi cedar. This is endemic, critically endangered and endemic to Malandi Mountain in Malawi. Unfortunately, I think the last mature individual has now been cut and is lost. But luckily, we have been working on this project for a number of years now. And some of our kind of partners in the UK, so I think Bedbury Pinetum, have been working with partners in Malawi to improve the propagation of this species. There's now 8 nurseries around the mountain propagating it, and we have over 500,000 seedlings now, which are being, planted back on the mountain through restoration trials. So this is a really exciting, quite large-scale project that we've been working on. We've recently set up a project in Côte d'Ivoire to restore the Reserve Botanique du Divo, sorry, awful French, working with ICRAF. And this is working to map and inventory 15 threatened species and to propagate them and restore them into the forest. This project will also be doing some conservation planning, but at site level, to work out with the stakeholders on the ground what is the best long-term plan for conserving and restoring this reserve. And then lastly, we've also been working in Mauritius on 12 threatened tree species. And actually, we've had trainers from Sandy coming to Mauritius to help do some training on propagation, because I think a number of the species have had some challenges. So a lot of our projects, we will often have different members from the network coming to share and exchange training and helping with different challenges. So for example, so in this Côte d'Ivoire project, some of our partners at Toro Botanical Gardens in Uganda will be coming to do training on seed collection. So we definitely always try and use our network to share expertise and knowledge. And then just very lastly, we also try, and monitoring is so important to see the impact of our work and actions. And each project will have species level monitoring, so baseline information, and then it will also be tracked throughout the rest of the project. And then we also upload this information onto the portal that I was mentioning earlier. So on the species page, it will also list the actions that are happening. So we're trying to make sure that this whole cycle, as we go through each stage, more information is filled out and populated. So for these really threatened species, we won't be duplicating effort, and we can try and make sure and establish collaborations where possible. And yeah, basically just trying to go from a point of no data to as much data as possible. So yeah, I think that's me, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions on email if helpful.
Cool. Thank you to Yvette in her absence. She's, like she said, she's happy to be in contact with people via email, so I could share that as requested. So our next speaker is coming to us from rainy Cape Town. And also, sorry, I just wanted to apologize for the sound levels, but yeah, on the day we did the recording, that was what we could do. Our next speaker is Mashudu Phalanndwa from the City of Cape Town's Biodiversity Management Branch. And he's responsible for the management coordination of invasive species programs. So Mashudu, thanks for being with us today. I see you sharing there already. Can you please unmute yourself and put on your camera, and then we can bounce from there. So it's we've now had the introduction to a kind of conservation overview, and Mashudu is now going to give us an idea of one of the quite new threats that we're dealing with as a country. And I think we're learning quite a lot about how to manage this going forward. So Mashudu, thanks for joining us. Take it away, bro.
Thanks, Rupert. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you just confirm if you can hear me loud and clear?
Yeah, no, your sound is wonderful, and
right.
And your screen share is also good. So thank you.
All right, perfect. Okay, yeah. Thanks again. As already introduced, my name is Mashudu Phalanndwa. I am from the City of Cape Town Biodiversity Management Branch. We fall under the Environmental Management Department. Currently, I am acting program manager for the invasive species management, and I'm responsible for managing and coordinating invasive species projects within the City of Cape Town. So my presentation today is going to be about the infamous polyphagous short-haul borer. So we'll just focus on the status and impact of the beetle in the City of Cape Town, and looking at some stats in terms of how the infestation is doing at the present moment in the city. But just to kick off, okay, my slide is not moving. Okay, there we go. Just to kick off a little bit of introduction. The polyphagous short-haul borer, it's scientifically called Ualesi fonicatus. It is an Ambrosia beetle that is known to be a native to the Southeast Asia. The beetle itself, it's very tiny in size, with the female beetle growing up to 2.5 millimeters. So that's the biggest they can grow. And males are a bit smaller than female beetles. So you can already see with how big this beetle can grow, that it presents some difficulties with regards to identification and obviously sighting it or seeing it with your naked eyes. What we also know about this beetle is that only females are capable of flying shorter distances of about 30 meters. But depending on the weather conditions and wind, they can also fly up to 400 meters, which simply means that the male beetle complete its life cycle within the host tree that they have infested or they have affected. And what we also know is that the climatic conditions or natural phenomena such as wind play a significant role in the distribution and dispersal of this beetle. But with many other environmental challenges, the human or people are also the biggest contributing factors when it comes to the movement of this beetle, and particularly in the movement or poor handling of infested material. We know that the beetle can live up to a year in a dead branch that was infested before it dies. So proper handling of the infested material, it's very critical in terms of restricting the movement of this beetle. And the female beetle are diploid, meaning that they do not need to mate in order for them to reproduce. So a female beetle is able to lay eggs that can produce offsprings, but in this case, they only produce male offsprings, which they will subsequently mate with their offsprings, and then start to increase the colony. So this kind of reproductive phenomenon makes it very difficult and complex to manage this beetle or to eradicate this beetle. And the beetle also has got a symbiotic relationship with 3 fungal species, which includes the Fusarium eualacea, which is a plant pathogen. So the beetle depends on this Fusarium eualacea fungi as a food source. And at the same time, the fungi depends on the beetle for movement from one host tree to the next. And once the beetle and the fungi enters a suitable host, the beetle will drill holes into the tree. You can see in the picture that I've got displayed here. These are the tunnels that the beetle drills in the trunk, going straight into the xylem of the tree. And you will see that there are dark spots or dark staining around the stem. So that is the spread of the pathogen or the Fusarium eualacea pathogen or fungi. And once the beetle and the fungi enters the tree, they subsequently impede the movement of water and nutrients within the tree, resulting in the dying of the tree, which we call the Fusarium dieback. And then PSHB was first detected in a tree in 2017 in KwaZulu-Natal National Botanical Garden in Pietermaritzburg. However, the DNA sequencing data that was collected from a specimen in 2012 from Durban suggest that PSHB has been present in South Africa for at least 10 years, if not more. So when it was picked in the National Botanical Garden in Pietermaritzburg, it was 5 years later since it's been in the country. And then in 2018, the beetle was confirmed to be present in Gauteng province and parts of the Western Cape, particularly in the George and Knysna area. And then in 2019 April, we then confirmed the presence of this beetle in the Somerset West area. And early this year, towards the end of January, we also confirmed the presence of the beetle in the southern suburbs of the city of Cape Town. And our first sighting or first confirmation was in the Newlands, and it has now since spread to Claremont, Rondebosch, Kenilworth, Mowbray, Rosebank, Wynberg, and Observatory. To date in South Africa, the beetle has been confirmed in 8 provinces, except for the Limpopo province. In terms of the infestation, the beetle attacks quite a variety of trees. According to FABI, in South Africa, there are 161 tree species that are susceptible to be attacked by polyphagous short-hole borer beetle. And what they have done is classified or categorized the types of trees that the beetle attacks based on how the beetle behaves within a particular tree species. So what they've got is as a category number 1, it's a highly susceptible reproductive host tree. So in this type of trees, or in this category of trees, the beetle and the fungi will establish, and the beetle will be able to breed or to create galleries in order for its population to multiply. The fungi will then spread into the internal system of the tree, and eventually the tree will succumb within few years. In most cases, we have seen species that once identified to have PSHB dying within a space of 6 months to a year. These highly susceptible trees can also become amplifiers of PSHB, meaning that the conditions within this tree are so good that the beetle is able to multiply quicker. The fungi is also able to spread quicker, but then the population size within the tree, of the population size of the beetle within the tree becomes too heavy, and allow the beetle to then start moving out and trying to find new host trees. And then the second category, it's reproductive host trees. In this category, both the beetle and the fungi are still able to establish, and the beetle is able to breed and reproduces successfully. These trees that are under this category may or may not die from the they may eventually die or succumb to the infestation of beetle and the fungi. And then the last category of the trees, it's the non-reproductive host trees. So these trees will still be attacked. So when you look at this type of trees, you will still see the symptoms of the PSHB. However, the conditions inside the tree are not that favorable for either the beetle or the fungi to reproduce or to multiply, which means that the tree may or may not die due to the infestation of the beetle. And generally, the non-reproductive host trees are not expected to succumb to the pressures of the beetle. So the pictures on the right, it's just some symptoms because the beetle is too small to identify. These are just symptoms that you would observe in a tree that has been attacked by PSHB. You will notice the white sugar-like substances oozing out of the trunk of the tree or from the back of the tree. Some trees are able to create excessive gumming. And in some trees, particularly the plain trees, you will see dark gray or dark brown staining around the tree. And as you get closer to the tree, you would start making observations as if the tree was shot with a shotgun, hence the name short hole borer. And then to obviously confirm whether or not these symptoms are the symptoms of PSHB, you need to scrape off the bark of the tree to go into the stem, and you will notice entry holes in the beyond the bark with some dark brown staining. So the entry hole is where shows where the beetle has entered or moved out of the tree, and the dark brown staining shows the movement of the fungi. And then, as I've indicated in the first picture, so this is just an example of how the tunnel looks like, and the dark and goldish spots that you see, those are number of beetles that are living inside a particular tunnel in the tree. And then, according to Fabi, as I've indicated, there's a total of 161 tree species in South Africa that are susceptible to PSHB attack. I think I've skipped a slide, if I may go back. Okay, yeah, so there is a total of 161 tree species that are susceptible to be attacked by PSHB. However, in the city of Cape Town, we have a total of 116 trees that we have, 116 different tree species that we have identified to be attacked by PSHB. And 3 of those species falls under the highly susceptible category. And I have put in this picture at the bottom here. According to Fabi, the Ricinus communis, or the castor bean tree, it's one of the highly susceptible trees that is affected by PSHB. But what is interesting is that in the city of Cape Town to date, we do not have records of the beetle or of any of castor bean that has been attacked or affected by PSHB. Obviously, that raises an alarm that maybe we need to be focusing, or we need to have a focused monitoring and assessment of these tree species to make sure that no invasion on these tree species goes unnoticed, because that might result in more distribution of the beetle. We also have got 39 species that forms part of, or that falls under the reproductive host trees. And of the 39 species, there are 15 indigenous tree species that are susceptible to this beetle, which we have already found in Cape Town. And then 29 species are found to 29 species are under the non-reproductive host category, and 9 of those are indigenous trees. So obviously raising an alarm or a concern with regards to the impact that this beetle is having on our indigenous trees. And then what is interesting is that we have found additional 45 species that are not listed as possible or potential host trees of PSHB that are being attacked in the city of Cape Town. And 10 of those are indigenous trees, meaning that to date, we've got a total of about 34 different tree species that we have observed the presence, or at least the symptoms of PSHB in. But what is encouraging, or what is interesting about this infestation is that all non-listed trees that have showed or symptoms or signs of PSHB presence in them have got low infestation level. So they have less than 50 entry and exit holes of PSHB, with the most number of holes counted in the non-listed tree species being 28. And then most of the entry holes that we have found on the indigenous trees that have been attacked but are not listed as host species, the most number of holes or entry holes that we have found was 3, which then sort of symbolizes very low levels of infestation. And a theory of source dynamic, source population dynamics sort of explains why we are finding very low infestation levels in trees that are not listed or that are not regarded as the possible host tree species for the PSHB. So according to this theory, the source population would be your reproductive host or non-reproductive or highly susceptible reproductive host tree. That provides suitable habitat condition for the beetle and the fungi to multiply. Once the population is saturated in the source population, then the species will start dispersing to other potential host trees. And once they find a suitable host tree, the population size may increase in a source or in a sink population, changing that population to become a source population. And then from there, the species will move to another host or to look for another suitable host. And then in the instance of the polyphagous short-hole borer, as an example, your London plane will be a reproductive host tree species. Once the population in the London plane tree it's saturated, the beetle will then start moving out looking for other alternative host trees. And once they find a suitable host trees, they will start breeding. Again, the population becomes saturated. This sink population now becomes a source population, and beetle will then move to another possible host tree. So what we suspect to result in low number of invasion in the trees that are not regarded as host trees is that the beetle will still move from the source population to the closest tree species, only to find that this particular tree does not provide necessary or suitable condition for it to multiply. As a result, they will either die in the tree or try to move out to find a suitable host species. And then in the city of Cape Town, what we've done is we identify the top 9 most affected tree species. To date, we have over 4,000 individual trees that we have found to be attacked or to be affected by the polyphagous short-hole borer. And this is the top 9. Your Asa negundo, which is an exotic with over 800 individuals of this species attacked. The English oak being the second most affected tree species with just over 780 individuals found to date. And then your London plane with just close to 500 trees that have been affected by the beetle, and the list goes on. So you will see that in the most affected trees or the top 9 trees, we only have one indigenous tree, which is a wild olive, which obviously from a natural or nature conservation point of view, it's quite encouraging. However, most of the exotic trees that are being attacked, the champion trees, some of them are very important and historic and cultural trees as well. So obviously from an urban forest conservation point of view, it is still concerning to have this number of trees attacked by this beetle. And then again, just looking at the level of infestation per tree category, again, you will see that the Asa negundo or the box elder and English oaks are the most attacked. And these 2 species presenting or showing symptoms of being heavily infested, meaning that with the box elder, we've got over 300 trees that have got more than 150 entry and exit holes, which indicates heavy or high population size of the PSHB. And then you've got over 400 English oak trees with high level of infestation, also having more than 150 entry and exit holes. So what we've done in the city of Cape Town, we then took the monitoring data that we've got and did a desktop exercise to try and estimate or predict how the invasion is likely to spread moving forward. So you will see that this is the Somerset West area where we first found the beetle in 2019. And this is the southern suburbs where we found the beetle invasion now in 2023. So we took into consideration the species that are attacked or that we have found to have PSHB presence. And we mapped where these species are occurring in the city of Cape Town to sort of predict how this beetle is going to move, or how likely it's going to move. And the red dark marks indicates the areas where we need to immediately focus on with regards to the monitoring and surveying, to make sure that we are getting a step ahead of the invasion. And then what we've also done is we also have been doing a lot of communication and awareness to sensitize our members of the community with regards to the PSHB invasion and its impact in the city of Cape Town. We've also done some capacity building and training. I think to date we have trained close to 300 service providers, businesses, conservation agencies, and private and members of the public on how to identify the PSHB, how to correctly handle the infested material and dispose the such infested material. We are also focusing on the removal of heavily infested reproductive hosts and any affected highly susceptible reproductive host. At this point, there is no chemical treatment that is available or that has been scientifically proven to treat PSHB once it attacks a tree. So the recommendations from the scientists is that any infested material, particularly highly susceptible reproductive hosts and reproductive hosts that are heavily infested, must be felled, chipped, and then either bent or solarized. So here it's just an example of how the city is currently dealing with the infested trees or affected trees. We chop down all affected trees immediately and chip the material into the sealed trucks to minimize any risk of further spread when we are doing the operation. And then once the tree is cut, we solarize the stump. So the solarization process is basically a process whereby we cover up a infested material with plastic so that the heat can get rid of whatever the beetle that will be remaining in the stump or in the stump that we had just cut. And then, as I've indicated, the chipped material, we incinerate it in a incineration facility. And where incineration is not possible, we solarize such material in clear plastic bags. The recommendation is that the infested material, if being solarized, they must at least be solarized for a minimum of 6 weeks during summer and up to 6 months in winter. So we are currently prioritizing removals in public open spaces and pathways. We are also exploring more solutions in dealing with biomass. And we are also doing some collaborative work with research institutions. So that in a nutshell is my presentation. Thank you. And yeah, if there are any questions, you can ask the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mashudu. There's already 3 questions in the Q&A. So if you don't mind, just you can answer those via text. And then at the end, we'll see there are additional questions. But thanks, it was a very comprehensive thing. And I think now people have an idea of what's going on in the PSHB space. So thanks so much. Okay. We're moving on now to our next speaker. So Precious Mabuza is based in Gauteng. She's a PhD student, and she's here to tell us about her work on a threatened protea tree from the grasslands. So that's Protea curvata. And Precious, I'm going to share from this side, and then you can just talk on your side.
I think I'll be able to share from this side.
Okay, go for it then.
Okay. You'll just let me know if you're able to see.
Sure.
Is that visible?
Yep, it's visible. Just put it onto presentation mode.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I'm muting myself.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Precious Mabuza from Wits University, and I'll be sharing some of my research that I did for my PhD, which was supervised by Professor Kevin Borkel. The title of the project is Understanding Disturbance, Vegetation Density, Seed Banks, and Pollination for the Conservation of Protea cavata. It's always challenging to condense your research for a quick presentation. So for today, I'll be focusing on two aspects of my research. I noticed that pollination was a topic for the previous webinars. So perhaps for today, we can look into something different. More importantly, I think that the parts I'll be focusing on today will make everyone more cognizant of the importance of disturbance and vegetation density when we consider tree conservation. The species I worked on is Protea cavata. It's a beautiful tree with pale green leaves and pink flower heads or inflorescences. It begins budding in April, and the flowering season is from June till November. Protea cavata populations are found on mountains that are characterized by serpentine soils. What makes the species of interest is that in the IUCN, it was classified as a vulnerable species. And unlike most proteas, it is not found in the fynbos. Rather, this species is endemic to Mpumalanga. The threats that were identified to the species include poor fire management and the impact of drought. Therefore, the aim of the study was to mitigate the impact of these threats by developing an informed site management strategy, one that could support Protea cavata recruitment. So during my honors year in 2017, I was actually able to sample one subpopulation and also determine the principal pollinator of the species. I found that recruitment in that subpopulation was low and it was not pollinator limited. The next step was to see if the other populations were also struggling in terms of recruitment. And as of 2006, only 4 subpopulations were known. However, I have found that there are in fact 5 subpopulations, and I'll be referring to these throughout the presentation using a lettering system from A to D. I undertook a census on each of the sites, and I measured parameters that could give us an idea of each site's demographics and its recruitment. We also wanted to understand what was causing the damage that was so common to find on the Protea bark. Each tree that was sampled was tagged and its GPS location was recorded, and this allowed us to resample the trees in subsequent seasons. In doing so, I was able to monitor the progress of each subpopulation over the years. Out of all subpopulations, I found that subpopulation A and subpopulation C had the most contrasting population demographics. I continued to sample these 2 populations the following year, and I also did a PCQ sample to determine the vegetation density and the species composition of the 2 sites. At site A, I found that the Protea trees did not show much growth over the years. However, a total of 8 tagged trees from the subpopulation had died within 3 sampling periods. And this makes up nearly 10% of the sample dying out within the space of 3 years, which was quite startling. In site C, only 1 tagged tree had died. It also showed no recruitment between the sampling periods, but fortunately, it already had some seedlings. The seedlings also appeared to fare relatively well after burning. Here's an example of that. we could see one of the smaller trees that we found in good shape just a few days after a fire. I noted that subpopulation A continued to show no recruitment since 2017, while subpopulation C showed the highest recruitment of all the sites. And these differences can be attributed to contrasting fire management. Subpopulation C is the one that was subject to annual fires, whereas the poorly recruiting one, subpopulation A, experiences fire infrequently and tends to experience intense fires as a result of the fuel load building up over the years. The differences between the sites with contrasting fire history suggested that long intervals limit recruitment by preventing seedling establishment. We were also able to see this in the results for the vegetation study. So for site A, where fires are suppressed, there was a higher woody cover and a high woody density. In savannas, this is indicative of an unhealthy herbaceous layer that cannot mediate the invasion of woody plants. Site A also had a dominance of less palatable woody plants. Therefore, these plants not only limit the space for the protea seedlings to establish, but as they are left unchecked by herbivory or frequent fire, they are able to outcompete the protea seedlings. The IUCN assessment on Protea cavata had listed land use change and drought as the major threats to the species. It neglected to emphasize the impact of disturbance. And that's quite an oversight since this particular Protea is a savanna species, and savanna species are largely shaped by fire and herbivory. Moreover, Protea cavata is endemic to a region with both high rainfall and frequent hail occurrences relative to the other provinces in South Africa. We began to fully appreciate the importance of such disturbances in May 2018. This was when we headed to the field with the plan of sampling flower heads for pollination experiments, but the weather had other plans for us. A massive hailstorm happened just a day before we began sampling and knocked out most of the flowers that we had intended to sample. This was obviously devastating in the moment because I had to reconfigure my research plan. It was similarly devastating for the trees, and the impact of hail was immediately noticeable. It prompted us to put the pollination experiments on hold and instead record the impact of hail on flowering, bark, and resprouting shoots. The storm had knocked off several inflorescences, and it had also knocked off the flower buds before they could even begin flowering for the season. As a result, there was significantly less flowering in the year of the storm than in the previous year, and also flowering did not recover in the following year. It was actually lower than the year before hail. While the impact of hail was quite severe on infructescences, the old flower heads, they actually appeared to be able to survive some of the fires. Therefore, the sharp decline that we saw in flowering can mostly be attributed to the impact of hail rather than the impact of fire. Next, I looked at how hail impacted the tree bark, and bark damage was assessed based on its presence on each tree, as well as the number of stems in each tree that were damaged. And we saw that population C and population D had the fewest trees with bark damage. It's interesting to note that these two were the sites that were not recently impacted by hail and also experienced less intense fires. In a quest to find the cause of bark damage, I considered the direction of the damage. This would clarify whether, for example, prolonged exposure to the sun could be a causal factor. So I measured the length and the width of bark damage as well as the direction it was facing. And results were highly variable between the different populations. For example, in some populations, southern-facing damage was the largest, and in other cases, southern-facing damage was of similar size to damage in any other direction. I also noticed that the appearance of bark damage was quite variable. Some damage was clearly caused by fire, as seen from the blackening of the bark. Other trees were damaged or even hollowed out by what appeared to be termite activity. And perhaps the most interesting observation was damage caused by hail, which left these scattered lesions on the bark immediately after the storm and likely leads to more peeling of the bark over time. Clearly, bark damage is attributable to more than one cause, as in some cases we could notice more than one type of damage on one tree, which is maybe why we found it so confounding in the first place. Even so, Site A had the largest area of damage overall, and this suggests that there is a strong impact of hail or sequential disturbances on Protea cavata. Since Site A is the one that experienced both hail as well as the intense fires that I had mentioned earlier. From these findings, what's the way forward? I will be updating the IUCN status of Protea cavata based on population size, density, as well as working in conjunction with results from my other objectives, which I have not included in today's presentation. And I will recommend that site managers apply more frequent fires and bush clearing to aid seedling establishment. But what about the broader relevance of my study, going beyond just this one species? Savanna studies place a very large emphasis on fire and herbivory as disturbances. This is a call to note the importance of hail as an equally significant disturbance, especially in the context of climate change, where we are beginning to see more extreme weather events. And this study has demonstrated that while hailstorms might not be as frequent as herbivore activity, they can have a lasting impact on savanna trees. Thank you.
Thanks, Precious. That was awesome. That climate change amplification of hail is really something that I'm sure we haven't thought about before. So it's a new threat that we've got to add to the list. So from a herbivory point of view, what sort of animals are available there to graze and keep it open?
So the sites are in different types of areas. One of them is in a nature reserve, Barberton Nature Reserve. So it has a lot of your herbivores like your impala, your kudu, and so on. And then the other one is on a privately owned property, and it's kind of remote. But we noticed that local goat herders sometimes try and cross the boundary to get their goats to herd on there. So we did suggest to the site managers perhaps trying to work out a plan on how to manage that.
So I see that there've been questions, and Mashudu's busy answering them in the chat. So we've got a minute or two if there are any kind of last minute questions that have come through, but most of them have been for Mashudu on the shuttle borer, and he's been answering them quite comprehensively. So thank you for that, Mashudu. Okay, so I think it's just interesting always when we've got people like yourselves around, Mashudu and Precious. Are there any questions that you want to ask each other based on presentations?
Nothing from my side, Rupert.
Okay, cool. So, and Precious from your side, just checking.
Okay, I'm checking the chat.
No, there's mostly just a lot of praise for you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Caroline, just hold on a little bit. Mashudu's busy answering some of the questions, and I have two. Okay, so I'm going to thank our speakers, and also remind the speakers that if you want to send us additional information when we post these webinars on the BotSoc website, we can put them additional information at the bottom as further reading for people. And then let's sorry, I'm just looking at questions. and then I'll introduce the next one. Okay, I'll answer that from Caroline. Yeah, so interested that it's all about, it's just the question, individual species conservation. What about forest survival? So definitely habitat, as I put in the response to you, habitat conservation or loss of habitat is the biggest threat to trees. And I think it's a golden thread that runs through all the BotSoc conservation work. There's, if you care to have a look on the BotSoc website, there is a 2020 blog about forests and so forth. So yeah, be our guest. We can only handle 3 topics at a time, and I think our speakers
I
covered
think my
quite a lot of
network is
ground.
going out.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna mute you then, Precious. But before you go, just thank you very much for making yourself available in that presentation, and we look forward to hearing from what you're going to be up to next. Same with Mashudu. Okay, so finally, I'm just gonna share this last slide. Right. So our thanks to all our speakers today and everyone for sticking around and asking questions. So Fabi is the go-to place. I've posted it in the links, but you can just Google it and you can see what's going on. And our next webinar is a bit of a celebration. So most of you on this call should know about CREW, the Custodians of Rare and Endangered Wildflowers, and they hit 20 this year. So this picture is from 10 years ago, and we've aged quite interestingly. And so we look forward to everyone joining us and hearing from the CREW, both the team and the volunteers, as to why they stuck around for so long. So thanks to everyone. See you next time, and be safe wherever you are. Take care. Cheers.